Okay, well, I think I'm going to do my little bit, which is an introduction to SEL Day and SEL4NJ, and then turn it over to our wonderful presenters. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute. And we'll start from the beginning. And just want to say hello. I'm Liz Hanson. I am the president of SEL4NJ and one of the founders of SEL4NJ. And I am just super thrilled to welcome you all here to kind of the midpoint of our webinar series in celebration of SEL Week and SEL Day. This year, just so you know, SEL Day was on Monday and it launched SEL Week. The theme this year is Skills for Success, Ready for the Future. And SEL Day is brought to you by a number of partners. The Urban Assembly, lovely colleague Dave Adams thought up the idea of SEL Day about 6 years ago. He's at the Urban Assembly. And then in conjunction with SEL4US, SEL Day was launched. And a couple of years ago, 6 Seconds joined in as the international partner. So where we are now is
Yeah, it
SEL.
looks like Liz is frozen. So anyway, we'll wait for her to come back.
Or Bill, would you like, am I back?
Her internet is, she's out in northern Wisconsin.
So I think I am frozen. So Bill, over to you.
Okay.
I'm,
Hey, Liz, your audio is breaking up.
yes. So maybe Bill, do you want to take over?
Now, for the third year, is that we have created a series of webinars during SEL Week to actually bring some of our New Jersey partners to the fore in terms of sharing their expertise. And today we're really fortunate to have, I guess, Kira, you've been in every one of these. You've done a webinar every year with ArtsEd New Jersey. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be able to learn more about what artistic SEL, SEL will do for people's well-beings. And I'd like to turn it over to Kira and Scott Edgar, who have a lot of great stuff to share. I know you're going to enjoy it. So over to Kira and Scott.
Thank you so very much. It is such an honor to be able to share some space. I'm coming to you from Chicagoland, not New Jersey, but I feel like I'm almost an adopted son of New Jersey by this point because of how often I've been there and interacted with the wonderful people of New Jersey. So thank you for allowing Illinoisian to be able to come in and share a little bit of space. I'm coming to you from the land of the Potawatomi and from a space of incredible gratitude to be able to share some of the good work that we are doing at ArtsEd SEL to be able to further not only the work of social and emotional learning, but the explicit, purposeful intersection with social and emotional learning and arts education. While we're giving the introduction, if you could just take a few seconds to, in the chat, rename yourself with your pronouns, your district/organization, and your role. This is going to be interactive, so if you could kindly please grab a pen, pencil, and some paper. We're going to be having you all be artists in just a little bit. And also in the chat, we would love if you would start to reflect upon what the arts mean to you. What do the arts mean to you and how you've experienced them? So share a time in the chat, please, when the arts gave you goosebumps. Just a little bit about the people who are here and who are not here. So around 2020, this was a moment when obviously we were going through a lot of things as a world. A few of us decided that it was a good idea to start a center. And Kira was there from the beginning. I was there from the beginning. Bob Morrison was there from the beginning. And the work that we did was we created the Center for Arts Education and Social and Emotional Learning, seeking for those intentional intersections. Part of that was the development of the framework for arts education and social and emotional learning, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we get to our resources section of this. Two people who are not able to be here today: Wendy Liscow, our executive director. I know many of you know Wendy, and our co-director of practice, learning, and research, Urel Lashley, who is out of town and works up at UW-Madison as a developmental and educational psychologist. So at this point, I'm going to hand things over to Kira, who's going to get everything started.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's great that you were all able to join us here in person via this Zoom webinar. Thanks again to Bill and to Liz and the entire SEL for New Jersey team that has created these opportunities. I've been really, really honored to be able to be part of each of the series to support SEL Day, SEL Week, but we know that we're living SEL throughout the whole year, right? So we get these moments that bring us together. And as Scott mentioned a moment ago, one of the beautiful collaborations that led to the Center for Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning started with a collaboration between SEL for New Jersey and ArtsEd New Jersey. And the center is a program of ArtsEd New Jersey. And so our vision for this work is that the sort of collective, strong sense of identity and belonging and agency that are possible when we explore the arts, those meaningful life experiences and those meaningful artistic learning experiences that students have that allow them to really develop a fuller sense of identity, have a place of belonging in the arts classrooms, and really get to lean into their artistic voice and choice, which leads to, building that important component of agency. And the way that we accomplish this at the center is really to champion arts education and social emotional learning together in complementary ways to facilitate embedded, intentional, and sustained application of SEL-informed arts education. So what we do at the center is an extension of what we do at ArtsEd New Jersey. And as Scott made mention, this is going to be very interactive. So we want to, if you could advance, Scott, to the next slide, please. We want to give you a little bit of an overview in our next 35 minutes together. We were going to begin with an artistic SEL experience. This is just a little bit, just the very tip of the iceberg, but we want you to be able to feel a little sense of, why these experiences can be so impactful. Then we'll look at artistic SEL foundations, give a nice grounding in some of the sort of core concepts. Scott will walk us through embedding well-being into artistic SEL with some of the more recent research that he's undergone. And then we'll have time at the end for Q&A and make sure that we share some resources with you. So I'm looking at the chat and your responses rolling in. I see lots of references to the things that give you goosebumps, which is nice to be able to reflect on. So this slide gives you a little bit of grounding in how we define artistic SEL. So artistic SEL intentionally embeds life skill development into artistic processes and practices in service of both student empowerment to enrich artistic fluency, so how those artistic literacy skills are applied independently, and human development. So when we talk about artistic literacy, artistic fluency, we're really talking about what is possible through the learning standards in visual and performing arts and the way that students have scaffolded learning experiences. So with that definition cleared, and don't worry, we'll have the slides posted for this webinar and the recording on SEL for NJ. So don't feel as though you have to sort of feverishly take notes, although if that's your way of learning, we support that. So we want to actually start off with a very short video here. And Scott, if you are queued up to be able to play it, I'd like to invite you to really look and listen. Thanks, Scott. So we want to recognize that this is just one aspect. Drawing and data visualization falls under, the visual and in some ways it falls under the media arts learning standards as well. Um, and we want to recognize that that's just one or two if we include media arts, artistic discipline. So when you're thinking about the arts, we encourage you to think about all five. We encourage you to think about visual art, media arts, theater, music, and dance. So in New Jersey, as well as the National Core Art Standards, we're fortunate. We have all five disciplines with lots of different sort of distinctions. And we're going to take a look at some of the things that are common across all of those five discipline. But before we do that, we want to make this interactive, not just having you view a little bit of drawing. We want to invite you to, if you haven't already, grab that pen or pencil, grab some paper. And if you look at the image that's on this screen, side note, this was actually a photograph that was taken at the very first um, Teen Arts Festival after we had closed for several years following the COVID pandemic. So this photograph I took one afternoon. It was also in early spring. Students were out there chalking the walk and they were making marks. And you can see in this image, some of those marks are straight lines, some of them are curvilinear lines, some patterning in their sketches. So let this inspire you. Let this inspire you with our next prompt. I see there in the chat, some of you are agreeing, and it's good to know that this resonates. So if you have your pen and paper, if you have your pencil, we're going to shift to a quick prompt. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Again, it's just for you to get a sense of how this might feel to step into the space. So using your pen or pencil, whatever you have, we invite you to show how you're feeling today, show how you're feeling right now, but without relying on words or emojis. So really leaning into some of the things that visual artists lean into and designers lean into. That could be line weight, that could be pattern. You could use a symbol if you'd like. I don't want to give too many directions here. This is intended to be open-ended, but just letting you all take a moment to reflect on how you're feeling today, and then to represent that on the page in some way. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look at this chat and read all of your examples. It'll take about another 20 seconds. First, you're identifying what the emotion or the emotions you're feeling, and then you're thinking about a way to represent that on the page. And I invite you, if it's something that you would like to share, feel free to hold it up. Oh, I see. It's so interesting to be able to see the drawings from a distance. So maybe if you're inclined, Scott, you can annotate what we're seeing, or you can just leave it there. I see Wendy has joined, Wendy Liscow, our executive director. What a great moment to be able to join us, Wendy. We were just getting into this activity. So, for those of you who took the time or were in a position to be able to go through this activity and this exercise with us, what was it like? How, just if you would drop into the chat, how did it feel to do this exercise? For those of you who are drawing all the time, if you're coming from a visual art background, hopefully it felt pretty comfortable. But I'm just curious if you would share in the chat, how did it feel to engage in that activity? And while you're doing that, I'll move forward and come back to some of your thoughts. Oh, I see someone has already said calming. So that's certainly something that we vulnerable. Okay. Yeah, it's going to feel different for everyone. Like that depends on what is our prior experience with drawing. Someone else says stressful, but it calms me to draw or color. Great. So as I'm sharing some more information, please take a look and look at how this experience felt for others. I see someone just dropped in. Bill says, tough to be non-judgmental. Yes, yes, yes. And that might be why Scott was feeling vulnerable. The emphasis, if you remember, part of that film said, the short little video that we just watched, it said to emphasize drawing simply with students so that they have an opportunity to get beyond that judgment about their drawing skills and really get to the purposefulness of using drawing or some type of data visualization as expression. So on this slide, what you see is the four artistic processes, which is really, this is the beginning of what binds all of those five arts disciplines. So if we're talking about music, theater, visual art, media arts, or dance, we are talking about having four common anchor artistic processes and 11 common anchor standards. So here, these are defined as the way the brain and body make art and define the link between art making and the learner. And so creating and performing, or if you're talking about visual art, you're talking about presenting, responding and connecting. These are the very things that when we allow our students to lean into these experiences in any way, small, like we've done just now, you could build a whole routine around small exercises, or more scaffolded and sequential, building up through the full arc of, our learning standards. But this is where it begins. It begins with the four artistic processes. So on the next slide, we want to talk about, and that is how artistic literacy is developed. On this slide, we're looking at where the artistic processes really begin to intersect to develop the pillars of SEL, which we refer often to those three pillars as identity and belonging and agency. So those are the things that as students are invited to practice their art making skills, their artistic SEL is allowing them to expand on how they understand their own identity and how that identity is in relation to others, how it's common, how it's different, and how, regardless of differences, there is a sense of belonging that we can feel when we come together to share in any one of those four artistic processes. And then agency, again, just the ability to use voice, student voice, is something that students who are engaged in arts learning often have an opportunity when we design it in such a way to lean heavily into voice. And it really allows them an opportunity to use the artistic spaces as a way to develop greater confidence and agency in other areas of their life as well. So if we look at what the tenets of embedding these SEL competencies and the sub-competencies into artistic experiences, we begin with the very first tenet. So that is to embed into the planning process. So before you're thinking about, designing a whole lesson and then adding SEL components, we really encourage that it is embedded in complementary ways where there are natural connections right from the start. That this is done intentionally using common vocabulary. We're going to build on that later as Dr. Edgar shares some skills and skill sets and practices that are part of what it might look like in an arts classroom, and then that all would be done in a way that is sustained. So we're hoping that it doesn't look like just a few minutes on a Friday or once a month, but that it would be throughout the school year sustained. And then also when you think about vertical articulation, that it would happen within the pre-K through 12 experiences that students have. And then also just thinking about how it might happen outside the arts classroom as well, when you're thinking about building positive climate and culture. What are ways that we can invite arts learning experiences to be a part of that? And then visible, really making it clear how this can connect for students and making sure that there are opportunities for students to see how this connects to their real world experiences in ways that they're able to speak about directly in their vocabulary, right? So not necessarily using the vocabulary of SEL, but how is it translated into vocabulary that students use and are able to kind of begin to make those direct connections themselves. And I think a clear example of this on the next slide, this is something that comes from a resource that we're going to share towards the end, but just to give you an example of what this might look like, the planning process of really being intentional about bringing SEL competencies into the learning in ways that are very complementary. So it's not that the arts learning is subservient to developing SEL skills or that SEL skills are subservient to the arts learning, but they are truly complementary. And this is a wonderful example by an educator in New Jersey, co-authored with Dr. Edgar, so that you can see what this looks like in practice. And the student artwork that's on this slide is actually another example of that data visualization. And in this case, they were visualizing their emotions, and that the whole lesson was designed for that purpose. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Scott, to share some more about his research and how this connects to well-being.
Kira, thank you so very much. And I hope you're able to see some of our foundations that we've developed and some of our common understandings that we've developed. And I think that that's one of the most important things for us to understand moving forward in the area of SEL. It's precision of language, it's precision of understanding, and it's that common vocabulary that's able to, no matter what we're coming around and what our situation is, for us to be able to say with clarity, this is what SEL means to me, to us, to our students. And one of the things that was very striking to me as I was looking at the call for Castle's next exchange coming up here next year in Minneapolis was that they had a more strong alignment with the area of well-being, that they were deciding to be very purposeful about figuring out how social and emotional learning can be in service of well-being. We've been looking at this from different angles for a while now, and obviously for those of us who are deeply in this work, we know that when we get SEL right, that it is in service of well-being. But the challenge is, I think, just how we got into a little bit of trouble, if I dare say, during the pandemic, is that social and emotional learning got so big that people didn't have the clarity of what it was, and it just became a buzzword. Well, I feel like well-being is the same thing, that if we're not careful, well-being can be a buzzword that without clarity and without detailed understanding, it becomes a buzzword. So today is all about figuring out exactly what that word means. How does that align with what you just heard Kira brilliantly describe as our approach to social and emotional learning, and how those can all be embedded in an artistic way to help deepen our students' identity, belonging, and agency. So I've been in the woods of social and emotional learning now for about 15 years. I discovered it at the University of Michigan after I was a K-12 music teacher for 10 years of my life. And the challenges even back then were that the students wanted me to be a therapist. They wanted me to be a counselor. We know that they go to trusted teachers to be able to seek some sources of help, to be able to talk, to be that empathetic ear. Well, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've traveled the country, and what I have on the slide right now is very much what I hear. I hear that my students are facing challenges and they don't know how to handle them. Give me a thumbs up if that resonates with you, that we have challenges that are absolutely impacting our students' ability to not only function, but certainly to thrive and certainly to be in a space to be able to be a teacher and a learner. And this leads to a source of frustration often, that our teachers find ourselves in a space of, well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to teach music in my world, but any of the arts, and let's just be honest, any subject, when they're dealing with these challenges? And I'm going to validate that a very real emotional response to that is one of frustration. I am so frustrated that the students have all of these challenges that I can't get to the content that I want to get to. That's a very real and honest response to what we're seeing in the classroom. Now, we all know in this space of talking about this that that's probably not the best response. It's probably not the healthiest response. It's probably not a response that's the best for our well-being, but it's a very real and honest response. So what we're going to talk about is a little bit of how do we reframe that response and how do we look at some of these challenges in a way that might give us a more empathetic stance and actually give us some tangible tools through social and emotional learning to help our students through these challenges in an artistic way. So the first thing that I want to suggest is that behavior is what is going to inform us about all of this. And I'm going to give you a precise definition of how I define behavior. For me, behavior is communication when we don't have the words. I'll say that again. Behavior is communication when we don't have the words. And oftentimes, our students are either literally or through behavior screaming at us. And they're saying all of the challenges are coming out in a way that they just don't have the words to be able to explain exactly what's going on in their heads. And again, this is often greeted with frustration. The behavior probably isn't conducive to educational aims, artistic aims. The behavior probably isn't conducive for what we're after, but the behavior 100% makes sense. The behavior is logical, and the behavior is derived from something that is a reality in our students' lives. Very rarely does something happen in our reality of working that is entirely irrational. Human beings are rational. It may not always be appropriate, but the behavior is going to make sense. So we're going to talk a little bit now about this idea of well-being, because all of the challenges that I just suggested that I'll dig in deeper into in just a little bit are going to impact our well-being. And our well-being, again, this idea of well-being, we've heard it throughout decades of different definitions. It's gotten too big. So when I say well-being, what I'm about to say is a precise definition to help us understand exactly what we're talking about. And as I'm explaining some different categories, some different silos of our well-being, Kira just put something into the chat. I would encourage you to grab it out of the chat. And it's a PDF of what you see on the right side of the slide, where it has elements of well-being. I'll tell you a quick, cute story. I used to have thermometers here as a way that we're going to measure our well-being. And I had some students and teachers say, what is that? And they said, you should really use a cell phone battery. And I was like, okay, I hear you. I'll adapt. I'll become more modern. So you see 5 cell phone batteries here. So as I talk through some different categories of well-being, friends, I'm going to ask for you to evoke some of what Kira had just led us through in our ability to shade, to make marks. And I would ask for you to shade in your different levels of well-being to a space that you feel your battery is charged in these areas now. So as I explained, physical, mental, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being, go ahead, and if you don't have the hard copy, obviously we just put it in the chat. You can mentally shade in. And then in the lines underneath, I would want you to reflect upon what are some things in your life that can impact how much your battery is charged. It could be positively impacting or draining. So there are things in our lives that happen on a daily basis that could make us feel more charged physically or depleted physically. This is a space for you to reflect on what is charging and depleting your batteries. But just to say well-being, go and take a mental health day. Well, I think we all know that that's not going to have long lasting results. To be able to reflect upon elements of well-being is going to get us to a deeper space. So the elements of well-being, friends, the first one is physical well-being. Physical well-being, and how we're defining that is how well is my body prepared for the tasks it needs to do. I'll tell you a quick story. Last Sunday, our 8-year-old Nathan in the Edgar household went for his first overnight with friends for a sleepover. And they didn't go to bed until midnight, and they woke up at 6 in the morning. You better believe that next day, his body was not ready for the tasks of getting through the day, to focusing, to not having meltdowns, to be able to get through what he needed to do on that Sunday. His body was not in a place of well-being. Okay, I'm going to come back to that example in just a second. But let's think about our physical well-being. How well today, and this is right now, this isn't at large, this is a momentary snapshot of how physically well we feel right now. How well is your body prepared for the tasks it needs to do? You can write into the little lines there. You can shade in. If you're feeling super duper charged, ready to go, it might be a darker line. If you're feeling a little bit more ethereal about your energy level right now, maybe a lighter line, maybe start to attach some colors to it. If you notice that on my sheet, I had some colored pencils accessible, so I have some meaning behind colors for my personal approach to the question that Kira led us through. So that's physical. Mental. Mental. How well am I able to cope with life's stresses? Oh my goodness. How many stresses are coming flying at us on a daily basis? And coping, friends, is one of the things that it doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge that the stresses exist. It doesn't mean that we pretend that we put on our rose-colored glasses and that we are living in a world of toxic positivity. It means that in the throes of stress, both eustress and distress, we are able to cope and function. The higher that you would charge that battery, we would get from a space of mainly functioning to a space of thriving. And oftentimes, when we talk about well-being, this is the area that people automatically glom onto, and they think that mental well-being takes the cake on all of these others. And that's why the precision of all of this really, really matters. Now, social well-being. How well do I surround myself with people that help me thrive? Ooh, that's a big one. So I'm going to go back to our example with our little guy, Nathan. So when he was in his sleepover, okay, his social battery was charged through the roof, nailed it. He was surrounded by people that were helping him thrive. He was living his best life. But when that battery went up, the physical battery went down. So each of these aren't exactly silos, are they? They can impact each other. And when we charge one area of our well-being, it will affect other areas of our well-being. Moving on now, if you're able to mentally or draw a little picture of this, social, where are you on social? Emotional, and I will just share just one of the most beautiful things, if you'll just indulge me for a second to be cheesy. My students know that I'm Captain Cheese, that my social well-being is always through the roof. And I know you're all in New Jersey, and if you haven't yet interacted with my dear colleagues, Wendy and Kira, they help my social battery go up every time that we have meetings. So I highly encourage that if you have not found your friends in New Jersey, to please do so. Emotional well-being. How well am I able to control the intensity and duration of my emotions? Now, this is something that Inside Out taught us really, really well. But when we look at our emotional well-being, we all know that there's no such thing as a good emotion and a bad emotion. We have to feel all of our emotions. We get that. But emotional stability and emotional well-being is about how well am I able to control the intensity. Emotions in any extreme are not healthy in keeping us in a state of well-being. Even being in an extreme state of joy is something that would impact. And then the duration. If I get, a really scathing email or something that really, ticks a nerve, right? What's that intensity look like? And how long is that duration going to keep me in a space of not being in equilibrium with my other pillars of well-being and in that area of emotional well-being? The fifth and final pillar of well-being is spiritual. And I'm going to share with you that I find this one to be one of the more challenging because of preconceived notions about spiritual well-being, saying that, oh, it's about religion, it's about a deity, it's about a belief in a higher power. I get that. I get that. Spirituality is so much bigger than that. For some people, that's exactly what it is. But this is about our personal values and our personal core beliefs of how we each approach our world. And as Kira was talking about identity, belonging, our personal values, our collective values. How deeply do your personal values inform your actions and goals? Friends, this is such a hard one these days. There are so many things that we deeply believe in. How does that interact? How much autonomy do we feel like we have to be able to impact our work with our personal values? And how many times are we tasked to do something that doesn't align with our personal values? Every time that that happens, friends, charge. Right? Right. So I hope that this gave us a little bit of insight into how well we can define well-being and the areas of well-being that we can be thoughtful about. Now, this is something that I have done with middle schoolers. This is something that I've done with high schoolers. This is something that I've done with college students to get them to measure their levels of well-being. If we're going under middle school, I probably would have adapted this and given them some definitions and think about how do we Mr. Rogers some of these definitions and something that makes sense for a kindergartner. But let me tell you, they know where they are physically, mentally, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. If they've been asked to do something that they don't agree in, hi, welcome to like being a kindergartner, being asked to do something they don't agree with. And that's what this is all about. So, I want to speak very quickly now about a major study that I did that resulted in about 18,000 pieces of data looking at what are the challenges that our students and teachers are perceiving our students having across the country. We looked at middle school and high school students and asked them what are challenges that they're having in their lives. And those 18,000, there were some outliers, but those 18,000 about pieces of data could be coded into these four core areas. These four core areas. The first one was self-management impulse control. This one was absolutely validated by our teachers, saying that it looked like the students were having impulse control challenges, but the students were calling this, I'm having a hard time focusing. So the language was different, but this idea of self-management impulse control. I'm having a hard time sitting still. I'm having a hard time being able to focus on the task at hand. Now let's think about what the behaviors could look like if that was the challenge. You're going to see squirrely students. You're going to see students who are off task. You're going to see students who are talking out of turn. You're going to see students who are giving us, get ready for it, behavior that is completely logical with this challenge, but not conducive for what we're after for our educational aims. When we start to be able to identify that behavior as, well, maybe this is an impulse control challenge as opposed to a kid who is intentionally trying to be disruptive. That's that frame. Can we reframe that? The next one is balancing expectations. The students were particularly articulate about this, saying that I'm being pulled in too many directions. My parents want me to do one thing. My school wants me to do one thing. I got a job. I want to be focused on my artwork. I want to be focused on band. I want to be focused on this, but my calculus teacher wants me to do this. But my chemistry teacher wants me to do this. And then I have to babysit my little brother. My goodness, balancing expectations that are all important, but that just feel like you're an octopus being pulled in 8 different directions. That. The next two are related, but something that I want us to think really thoughtfully about. The first one is afraid to take risks and being vulnerable. It's a huge one, friends. If we are afraid to take risks or be vulnerable, we are not going to start an interaction. We are not going to enter into an experience because we are afraid to take the risk. Now, I know that this is a safe space, and I know that Kira's not going to judge my artwork, but I'm afraid that experience made me feel vulnerable. So when I held this up, that felt like a risk to me a little bit. Well, what's someone going to interpret about how my day's going based upon what you see? Afraid to take risks, being vulnerable. Now, I have some skills that I've worked on that help me with that. The next one, being resilient. This means that when something gets hard, I stop. I'm willing to start, but the second that something gets hard, I stop. And there are steep learning curves in all of our content areas, especially the arts, that become challenging. And it's very easy to say, I quit. I quit. So we're going to move to this slide, which we're going to drop into the chat for you. And for us, this is what SEL is. These are discrete skills that we can build in our classrooms. In our work, in our spaces, we can practice these skills through routines, through common vocabulary. I want you to take a look at this sheet. And again, we're going to drop this into the chat so that you'll have the PDF of this. Thank you, Kira. And I'm going to move off of this slide. It's going to be hard to see this, but you can grab this from the chat so you can see it in its full size. But I want you to think for just a second, for those four challenges that I just articulated, what are some skills on that sheet that would be helpful? What are some skills that would be helpful if we had them to confront those challenges? What are some of those skills? So, an example, impulse control. Maybe it's manage stress. Maybe it's self-accept. Maybe it's coping. Maybe it's de-escalating emotions. Those are discrete skills. Can we attach those to a challenge? And then the question isn't how do we build well-being? The question isn't how do we attack a challenge? The question is then how do we build skills, which is the SEL language that we've rallied around forever. This is the reframe to get us to think about challenges as being the inroads and interpreting that behavior. Then our job is to come up with those routines, come up with those learning experiences, come up with those common vocabulary spaces that can help practice those skills. I'll end very quickly with just one thought here that very recently, Kira's video that you saw at the beginning was from Edutopia. We know our friends, George Lucas at Edutopia, are long been champions of SEL. And our dear friend from New Jersey and Rutgers, Dr. Maurice Elias, just published this article promoting SEL through music education. And to look at some of those routines that I suggested, to look at some of those ideas in terms of common vocabulary, take a look at this article because it's worth its weight in gold. Maurice was a champion of our work in here, and we're really, really proud to share that this just came out. Take a look at the date, February 21st, 2025. So with that, friends, I'm going to hand it back to Kira.
Thanks, Scott. Boy, a lot of information there to digest, but I'm so glad that this is recorded and folks can return to it at any time. I just dropped into the chat a link to that article that Scott mentioned that was just published. And again, yes, Dr. Maurice Elias, one of the co-chairs when we were working on developing a framework. So dare I say we may not be here in this particular moment, in this particular way, had they not had that kind of wonderful institutional relationship with ArtsEdNJ. So we will quickly just go through and point out a couple things. This is the landing page for ArtsEd SEL website. So there are a lot of resources that you can find from this website. And in particular, there's a searchable database and the top navigation bar. If you click on the word resources, it will take you out to that searchable database. But on the next slide, what you'll see is we'll call out very specifically one particular resource. This is found on the landing page of that same website. And the example, one of the examples of the student artwork and the lesson that was created is actually included in this collection, as well as a number of other examples. And what I think is really, really compelling about this, this was a compilation after 2 years of the center being opened. All of the briefs that had been published prior to our second anniversary or third anniversary really were put into this collection. So it's all of the voices, all of the perspectives, lots of different roles contributing to this, from teachers to supervisors of the arts. It's just there's a piece of pre-service arts educators that is here. So when I say it's a variety of voices and perspectives, I truly mean that. On the next slide, what you see is an archive of the Save the Music student empowerment series. And even though this was music centric, if you're someone who I see, it seems like we have some folk, at least one person who's coming at this from a dance perspective. A lot of these things in the reflection guide, as well as the webinars, could be translated to a different art form. So want to make sure that you know that this is music centric. However, there's a lot here, principles that would apply to all art forms. And then finally, just wanting to make sure what we have found has been key to this work is the professional learning that we've been doing over the last 4 years through the Center for Arts Ed and SEL. So we want to make sure that you know that that's available, and you can find out more information about that on the website as well. So with that, I want to make sure we have some time for questions, and our executive director, Wendy Liscow, has joined us. So, please don't be shy. I know Wendy always loves to hear and engage with people to know what's top of mind, and I share that same feeling. So please feel free to drop questions in the chat, or it's a small group. You can come off mute if that's easier. But we want to make sure we have a few moments for questions. Kelly, I don't know if Kelly, oh, Kelly, you're here. You enjoyed the activity. Wonderful. I'm so glad that it's something that resonated, and hopefully something you feel like you can bring into other contexts. No questions right now. You're very welcome for the resources. And our email addresses are all on the slide. So if you find that you do have a question when you start to dig into some of the resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. Right. I guess we will then, Wendy has a question about artistic SEL in your classrooms. The rest of SEL week. I think Liz or Bill could fill us in about the rest of SEL week. And please feel free to share your artistic SEL examples in the chat.
Right. Well, this is I just love listening to all of you guys. I think my internet is still unstable because I'm in a bit north of you, Scott, and we've turned into ice and snow. But this is just fabulous. And in fact, I'm giving a presentation next week at a big camp conference. And just thinking so much of this translates beautifully into other contexts. And, just so many of the resources and the tools and the activities. So I was madly taking notes as well. So to answer your question quickly, for the rest of SEL week, we have 5 more webinars coming up. Tomorrow, we have 2, which will be talking about SEL and social media. We're also going to be talking about the NJ Sky survey, along with sustainability for schools, talking about anti-bullying efforts in SEL, as well as developing a mindset of hope and perseverance. And then we'll also be hearing about some work that's been going on in Mercer County through our partners at KidsBridge. So a full week. But I have to say, I think that this presentation landed just absolutely perfectly in the middle, because was just fabulous. And speaking on behalf of SEL4NJ, we're just so proud to have been a part of this, and just continuing to bring your voices to many. And we have received quite a few messages, yesterday and early this morning, saying people couldn't be on, the webinar, but they wanted to make sure the resources are available. So I think your reach will be much bigger than just the small, lovely group that was here today. So just wanted to thank you all. This is just fabulous. And hopefully those of you can pop into some other webinars, and hope to see Kira and Scott and Wendy sometime soon. So really, really appreciate it.
If I could add my thanks to you guys, I think one of the things that really resounds with me, of course, my career was in music before I was an administrator. So I think that one of the things that I think is so important in the work that you guys are doing is the intentionality of making the connection between artistic endeavors in all of the art forms and these skills. I think innately, I've done this work since I retired because I realized, I was a high school band director, I realized that these are the skills that really help to make a successful performing organization. And that I carried that through being a school administrator all the way up to being a superintendent of schools. Um, and the truth of it is making this intentional connection makes it so much easier for people who haven't had that realization innately to to have that realization and to understand the value of all of these skills in every form of a human endeavor, not just art, not just music, not just dance, not just drama, in all of it. And so I thank you all for all the great, excellent work you've done for formalizing all of this, because the work you're doing is unique.
Mm.
Thank you, Bill.
And
I know that you speak as a former arts educator, so that means a lot. And the common vocabulary, if we can have a part in making that something that has the ability to be understood widely beyond the arts circles, we'll keep we'll keep doing our part, to aspire to make that happen. But thank you for that acknowledgement.
and we will continue to do ours as well at SEL from New Jersey. So thank you so much for giving up your time today to be with us and share your insights, because they're really important insights. So we do appreciate it. And I
Thank-
know we had some questions from people about what our webinar series is all about. I'm just going to refer you to our SEL website. It's selfornewjersey.org. And if you look on the landing page of the website, you'll see all sorts of stuff that's going on this week for SEL week. So
And
if you visit the website, you can get the schedule, you can register for the remaining, we have 5 remaining sessions this week. You can certainly register for those. And again, thank you all for being here.
and also Wendy was on it. She's ahead of the curve and posted it in the chat. I'll
Thank you,
put it in
Wendy.
our description. So thank you, Wendy. So great. Thank you so much, friends. I hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Be safe,
Yeah,
be well.
thanks.
Yes.